Throughout human history, we've had a default explanation for suffering. Something outside of us caused it. The Greeks blamed the fates. Medieval Europe blamed sin. The 20th century brought us psychology, which at least pointed inward. But even then, the story was often that someone else had broken us. Honestly, it's quite convenient. If the cause is always out there, we never have to question what's happening in here. Think about the last time something went wrong in your life. A relationship that fell apart. A job that didn't work out. A friendship that ended badly. What was the story that you told yourself about why it happened? If you listen closely, you might notice something. The story often begins with someone else. It was the timing, bad luck. It was your parents, your boss, your partner. And if none of that fits, well, Mercury was probably in retrograde. That's the paradigm I want to shift today. So let me take you back to a younger version of me. I had a childhood shaped by early adversity. I really did have every external circumstance to blame. On the Adverse Childhood Experiences scale, my score, this is known as an ACE score, was a 10 out of 10. I aced the ACE, but really that's not a good thing. That score reflects exposure to abuse, neglect, addiction in the home, and instability. Research from the CDC Kaiser Permanente Adverse Childhood Experiences study shows that 75% of high school students report at least one adverse childhood experience. 20% report 4 or more. And within that group, there is a significantly elevated risk across nearly all major life outcomes, including mental health issues, addiction, serious challenges later in life, even reduced life expectancy. That was the path I was on. At 15, I ran away from home. No money, just the absolute certainty that if I could get far enough away, I could finally start my real life. What I got instead was the streets. I learned how to survive on them, how to read situations, read people, how to make myself useful enough to stay safe. And then a man told me that he loved me. He was 32, and I was 15. And I believed him because he said it in a way that made me feel safe. It wasn't, but my nervous system didn't know the difference. It just recognized something familiar, intensity that felt like love, chaos that felt like home. At 16, I became a mom. And by 25, I was figuring out how to leave that abusive relationship with 2 daughters depending on me. And for the next 20 years, I kept entering and leaving relationships, chasing a sense of stability. You know that phrase, she really knows how to pick them. Yeah, that was me. I didn't know it then, but I was repeating something I didn't yet understand. And then I watched those patterns begin to echo into my daughters' lives. That's when something changed. I left home to get away from the very thing I walked directly back into. And now my daughters? I thought, what's going to happen to my future grandchildren, whom there are 5 of now? And eventually I was able to ask, What cycle did my parents experience? I later came across an idea explored by trauma researchers Peter Levine and Gabor Mate. It's not only about why things happen to you, but what patterns in you may be influencing what happens next. That insight changed everything for me. It gave me agency, and it made me an architect of my own mind. And it set me on a path, one that led me to study and now practice Ayurvedic approaches to mental and emotional well-being. Now, before we go any further, let me be very clear. I am not saying what happened to me is my fault, and I am not saying that you are to blame for the harm that you've experienced. But here's the problem. Millions of people are living in patterns they don't understand. They change jobs and find the same boss. They end a relationship and somehow attract the same partner. They move to a new big city. They even buy that gym membership. They're definitely going to use this time. They change everything externally, and within months, it all feels familiar. It's almost impressive. And so we ask, why does this keep happening to me? It's an honest question, but it's a limiting one. Eastern philosophies call this samsara, the cycle of repeating patterns. Trauma research describes the same thing through the nervous system, the body replaying experiences in search of resolution. These patterns don't always show up as memories. They can show up as choices, reactions, relationships. And after working with this, professionally and personally for decades, I can tell you, we all have them. So here's the idea I would like you to carry with you. Stop asking why this keeps happening to you. Start asking, what patterns in you may be influencing what happens next? That is where your power begins. So here I was at 15. My parents were struggling with addiction. And even though I was a straight A student with a dream of medical school, school wasn't teaching me how to live in that environment. And I believed what a lot of people in pain believe, that geography would save me. New city, new me, every time. What I didn't understand is this: you cannot outrun your nervous system. So I would leave one situation, walk straight into another. Different faces, similar pattern. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That is exactly what was happening. Research in trauma and neuroscience shows that unresolved experiences, they don't just disappear. They continue to influence how we feel, what we expect, and what feels familiar. The brain learns familiarity long before it learns what's safe. So if early experience taught you that love comes with instability, your system may begin to recognize that combination as normal. So eventually I had to ask a very different question. What is the one thing all of these situations has in common? Me. I was the common denominator. Now that realization wasn't about blame, it created clarity. My perspective changed from seeing my life as something that was only happening to me to recognizing my role in what happens next. Psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl wrote, between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. He was pointing to the power of the space between what we've been through and what we do next. And learning how to access that space can change the trajectory of our lives. So what do we do with this? A change in perspective only matters if it becomes a practice. If the pattern is inside, then the work happens inside. So I'd like to try something with you. If you feel safe and comfortable with me, please close your eyes. Now join me in taking a nice big deep breath in through your nose, the belly rises. Long exhale out your mouth, the belly falls. Now I want you to get big. Imagine you are standing on top of a mountain, looking at your life from a distance. Don't judge, just observe. What keeps repeating in your life? You can't see the shape of a maze from inside it. Getting big is the first step. Now let's get curious. Ask yourself, where did this pattern begin? What did I learn to expect, accept, and believe? Now get honest. With courage, acknowledge, I may be playing a role in what happens next. Courage is what makes change possible. You may slowly begin to open your eyes, but see if you could stay on the mountaintop. Now, the moment that changed my life, it wasn't when I left my last relationship. It was in a therapy session. And for the first time, I could hear my life reflected back to me. And suddenly, I could see it. I chose them. No shame. No anger. Just truth. I began to see the space between what happened, what I kept allowing to happen. Because the part of me that kept choosing those situations, she wasn't broken. She kept choosing what felt like home. And when I could see that clearly, with compassion instead of judgment, something changed. If I could participate in creating these patterns unconsciously, just imagine what I could create consciously. And it didn't happen overnight. It took decades of asking again and again, what is my role in this? As my life gradually began changing in ways that I could finally feel and see. So the next time you hear yourself say, this always happens to me, pause. Get big. Get curious. Get honest. Take ownership of what comes next. Every major change in understanding has required us to let go of a comfortable story. This one asks something similar. To let go of the idea that your suffering is caused entirely by something outside of you, because it's incomplete. Incomplete stories keep us stuck. Stop asking why this keeps happening to you. Instead, ask, what in you may be influencing what happens next? When you begin to make the unconscious patterns in your life conscious, you stop calling it fate. And that is freedom. Thank you.